like to recognize and thank our sponsors and the members of the Public Education Debate Coalition, the Inkley Institute of Politics, KSL, Desert News, United Way of Salt Lake, Utah PTA, Sutherland Institute, and the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools. Our candidates for this debate this evening are Christina Boggas and Damon. This debate is meant to provide a platform so that voters understand the views of the candidates on important issues facing education in Utah and vote better informed. The election day is November 8th, in just 4 weeks. But Utah voters will soon receive their ballots and will be able to cast their votes. Before we start the debate, I have gone over the rules of the debate with the candidates. Let me explain them to our audience. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening statement, and for the first half hour or so, I will pose questions. Given 90 seconds. Should a rebuttal be necessary? Extra 30 seconds. The candidates have no prior knowledge of the questions I will pose. The same questions will be posed to both candidates, and we will alternate the answers. We have a timekeeper with us tonight that is reminding us of the time and make sure that we are on track. At the end of the approximately about a half hour, I will begin asking questions posted by you, the viewers, or the audience. Should we not have enough questions, I have additional questions, but I don't think that'll be a problem tonight. Prior to the debate, I have met with the candidates to review the rules and determine who will start the opening statement. It was determined that Christina Boggas will go first. We will alternate the answers after that. Let's begin with your 2-minute opening statement. Christina.
Thank you, Franz, and thanks for everyone to make this debate happen. Again, my name is Christina Boggas, and I would just like to start by saying that I am first and foremost a mother of 3 young boys. Of all the many letters that I have behind my name, and I have the privilege of adding behind my name, I think the 3 most important are M-O-M. And having served in those 2 capacities in education as a parent and as an educator, I just have a few things to offer as we open. One is that I've served for 21 years. I've served in rural schools that serve fewer than 300 students. I've served in cluster model schools, potted designs, suburban and inner city schools. I have a deeply rooted understanding of almost every facet of the educational system. Broken down, I've served a decade at the secondary level and the same at the elementary level. I've served in Title I and focus schools as well as thriving top-tier institutions. I've been in the general education classroom in the elementary, and I've served in many capacities at the secondary level. I've experienced active school shooters and the aftermath of active school shooters, and I've also experienced first-place state trophies. I've experienced private tutoring and small group instruction to an ensemble of almost 200 students at a state competition. I've served on PBIS and MTSS committees, and I've been a teacher development trainer and mentor. I've been there. For 20 years, I've been there, and this world is vast. It's distinct, it's vast, and it's broad. And I believe that I am confident in stating that I've touched virtually every part of the educational sphere as a parent and as a teacher, because each of my 3 children had individual needs that had to be met, and the decisions had to be made to make those needs met. And so the point would be that I offer a voice that is sound, it's of reason, it offers a breadth of experience and the vast training needed to do this job well. So with that, my name is Christina Boggas. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Damon. I am a special education teacher at high school in Granite School District. First of all, I'm so grateful for you guys for being here and for virtual attendance as well. I kind of wish we could all get a big table right now because this is terrifying. I feel like my heart is beating, I'm a little nervous, so this debate forum is new to me. And on my way here, I was thinking, okay, Audrey, why are you doing this? Why are you running? Why are you coming here? And I was thinking about this morning when I swung by my school to hold an IEP with parents that did not make it, before I went to my district training. And I have a student on my caseload. He was in my math classes. He has Marfan syndrome and a specific learning disability. And he's about 6'10", and he has, his eyesight is going with this disease. And he came in and he said, "Miss Dameron, your message yesterday telling me I should have gone to class, I'm going to class today. I'm changing who I am. Here are my keys." And he gave me his car keys. This is a big deal because this kid really, really loves his car, and he's been leaving in the middle of the day, which is not great. And I thought, yes, thank you. I wish I could be here all day to keep this going. But I am here today as a candidate for a state school board because of students like this. For the parent last year who I texted almost every single day to get her child to graduation, which was a team effort from everyone. And because I love teaching. It's the greatest gig around, and I'm thrilled to be here. So nervous, but very excited. And I look forward to this debate. Thank you.
I just want to remind everyone that if we clap after every statement, we may have less questions. So please refrain from clapping. Perhaps at the end you can clap. First question for Audrey. You are both, for both of you, but starting with Audrey, you are both teachers. Would you please explain to our audience what you teach, what brought you to the teaching profession, and how your profession will be an asset at the school board?
Great question. I do love that both of us are teachers. I did not want to be a teacher, actually. I was going to be a science major, genetics or something really fancy and way better than teaching. And then I ended up teaching swimming lessons the summer before I went to BYU. And I ended up being paired one-on-one with a little boy with autism, and he insisted on being called Spiral the Red Dragon, and he had a crush on every girl in the pool. And we mostly worked on social boundaries as compared to swimming lessons. But my boss at the end of that summer said, "Audrey, what are you going to do in college?" And I said, "Oh, science or something." And she said, "You should really think about special education. You're really good." And here we are, 12 years later, and I still love it, and I have plenty of student stories and students that I still connect with. I taught in St. Louis for a little while, and I had a student reach out to me and ask if we could FaceTime about some math questions because she was in college, and I'm like, it's like these are the relationships that we want and we care about. This aspect, my desire to connect, my love of creating relationships, my in-class experience, these are the kind of attributes and things that I can bring to the state school board, and I hope I can do so.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, so the three questions, right, were what I teach, what brought me to teaching, and what does my teaching experience bring to the Board of Education? It's a lot of questions in one question. I'm going to see if I can cover this. So I presently am a music specialist in the Salt Lake City School District. So I teach math, English language arts, notation. I teach rhyming, I teach reading, I teach all sorts of things including geography and what we would call empathy, all in this beautiful realm of music education. And I think that's what I love the most about music education is you get to touch every subject area. You get to touch civics and social studies and geography and math and ELA. The time that I got to teach palindromes in music was one of the most glorious days of my life. And the fact that kids learn in that way is really impressive. Music is what I do now, but music is not the only thing that I have ever done. As you heard in my opening statement, what brought me to teaching was actually a teacher, believe it or not. I was a young mother, and what brought me to teaching was a teacher who said, "You would be really good at this. Come teach." That's what brought me to teaching. And I think what I bring to the board is so broad and so vast, having a broad view. I serve in multiple buildings, in multiple capacities. I serve over 500 students every year, and building relationships with those kids is one of the most glorious things, but also watching and experiencing what the teachers around me experience has brought me to a place where there was a need to run for the Utah State Board of Education. And so I will bring those things. Thank you.
Thank you. An estimated 96% of Utah children rely on public education, whether public schools or charter public schools. The other 4% are homeschooled or private schools. The Utah State Board of Education is given by the Utah Constitution the role of overseeing public education. Would you please share with our audience your commitment to public education, as well as your assessment of how well public education is going in Utah, both good and bad? We start with Christina.
Awesome. So there are making decisions, not just for today, but we're making decisions for our posterity. And if that doesn't scare you, it should. It absolutely should scare you. And I think that as we look at the assessment of public ed, we've got some things that we should celebrate. I think of very specifically 3 educators that I work with that I know have many similes throughout Utah, but they're extraordinary educators, and that's something to celebrate. They're people, when I say, you know who could teach you more about that? I'm gonna call so-and-so. That's something to celebrate. However, we do have issues with the outcomes of our educational system. Our proficiency scores were published just last week, and 44, 41, and 44% are our proficiency rates in language arts, math, and science. I think that a solution to that is our teacher retention, which now sits at 58%. And so we have lots of solutions, but one would be to lead from the top and to really address the public discourse in this state so that we can move forward positively. Thank you.
I feel like I need to stand or sit. I'm so tall, I don't know what to do. Goals for public education. I appreciate a question bringing in public education, having worked in public schools, and I keep thinking about what comes next. Working in a high school, I'm often thinking about what are my students going to do after high school. And as a special education teacher, there's a part of an IEP called the transition plan. And we talk with parents, we talk with the student, we talk with other teachers, all the resources, and we ask, what are you going to do after high school and how can we help you get there? And I think about the same thing for elementary. How can we get them with a nice transition to middle school to high school to post-secondary life? And that focus on what comes next includes not just their academics, but those soft skills and hard skills. I am constantly working with my students to talk about communication. Like, we don't demand, okay, we're gonna go and have a great conversation. We have this need to create opportunity for our students. And so the goals I have would tie into what comes next and how can I create the best opportunities for our students. And so it's really creating that community with the resources that our students need to be successful. And that's what I would bring to the state school board. Thank you.
May I offer a small just addition to that? So I think that we need to be concerned not just about resources, but about skills. When our students enter the workforce and they enter the world, if we are entering that space and unable to do grade level math, that puts them at a great disadvantage. And so without a solo and singular focus on academics first, I think that we're doing our students a disservice because they would then leave the system without the skills to engage the resources in front of them.
Let's engage in a bit of magical realism. You are one of 15 board members, and 10 board members generally agree with you. In other words, you have the ability to meaningfully influence the state of Utah public education system for years to come. What would your 3 top priorities be? We start with Audrey.
My 3 top priorities
Yes.
being on the state school board.
Yes, let's just say that most of the board members agree with you, so you don't have to fight as much. So what would your top priorities be?
Okay, so if I'm not fighting, there's several people. Okay, top priorities on the state school board. Again, I want to bring in that teamwork and collaboration, and then stewardship. We want to make sure that our students have safe learning environments. I know that in order for me to teach my students, they have to enjoy my class or feel comfortable or safe walking in my door, coming to my school, and then I can make sure that they're actually that they're learning, right? Our goal is to create lifelong learners in schools. So, so the first goal is definitely to make sure that our students are feeling safe and comfortable. As a teacher who loves my teaching community, I also make sure we're addressing teacher retention and we're getting quality teachers and that they're staying, that they want to be here as teachers. I also want to focus on college and career. And again, as a special education teacher, not all of my students are going to go to college, but they can all be contributing members of society that have good jobs and high quality of life. And so I want to make sure that along with academics, I'm also making sure that they can function in society. And I'm excited to do that. That is the thrilling work, and that's what I'll bring to the State School Board. Thank you.
Christina, your turn.
Well, first of all, I must disclose that I'm offended that I only get 3 priorities, but there, we'll go with that. I think if I were to address my first priority, which is one of the primary reasons I ran for the State School Board, and that would be to reduce teacher workload. The work that our teachers have on their plates is daunting, it's too much, and it's unacceptable that our State Board has not addressed it in a tangible way in real time that teachers feel on the front lines. It's unfortunate and it's irresponsible that has not yet been done. I would bring to my priority list the streamlining of our education system to academic basics. We can't ignore soft skills, but when we elevate soft skills above academic skills, we've lost the battle and we've missed the mark. And then I think the third thing that I would focus on is transparency. And by transparency, I want to just note for the record that I'm not talking about curricular transparency. I'm talking about transparency within our state agency. And I want to make that statement very boldly. Our state agency claims transparency, but they're not really transparent. For example, I challenge you to go find the board agenda in fewer than 10 minutes. For example, for well over 6 months of 2021, the State Office of Education failed to produce written minutes of its meetings. They were not present on the USBE website until July of this year. Their meetings are 14 hours long. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem to me to be transparent to the public. And I think transparency from the State Board down would be my third priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a bit of a long question, but I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
A few years ago, the Utah State Board of Education created its vision for qualities that a graduate should possess or aim to possess, as I will describe them briefly for our audience. It's called the Portrait of the Graduate. I have the couple summary pages here. It outlines 20 competencies grouped in 3 areas: M for mastery, A for autonomy, and P for purpose. Some of the competencies are academic, others are not. It's inspirational in nature, but not always quantifiable. Among the competencies, I just chose 6, but there are 20. Academic mastery is 1. Civic, financial economic literacy, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration and teamwork, honesty, integrity, responsibility, hard work, and resilience. There are others, you can find them. I will ask that they would be put in the chat. I should add that the Portrait of the Graduate of the USB is a model, and that does not have to be adopted by districts. You can find the URL. What is your opinion of the vision of the Portrait of the Graduate? I think we'll start with Christina. Right.
Awesome, thank you. So the Portrait of a Graduate was an undertaking that I think we should all acknowledge the effort that went into that. I love many of the things that are listed in there: civic, honesty, integrity, critical thinking. But I think one of the biggest issues with Portrait of a Graduate is, as you said, we're not quantifiable. How are we reaching these goals? If we want to know that we're measuring these things should be able to be measured. How do you measure grit? How do you measure honesty? And so I think that we need to consider, as we create these goals within our system, is it measurable and achievable? Because we can't legislate honesty, we can't legislate critical thinking. And so I just want to ask those questions. And then I would ask, is it appropriate that all of our students look the same? Audrey's described her classroom. I could describe mine. But the reality is our students are different. They come from different backgrounds and experiences. They come with different gifts. They come with different inclinations. And the idea that every single child should be like a cookie cutter coming out, I think we're missing the mark in education if we can't measure it and if we are not in a place where we can actually achieve it while tapping into a student's asset and springboarding those into a place of success for the individual child as opposed to the group as a whole.
Audrey, your turn.
Thank you. I really like Portrait of the Graduate. I have looked into it. I'm a part of a group called the Utah Teacher Fellows that's working on teacher leadership. And we talked about the Portrait of a Graduate. And I love this idea that we're focusing on academics and also recognizing and acknowledging that we've got to prepare our students and our kids for what comes after high school. And so I like that it has both, the academic focuses, but, financial literacy was on there, and civics. I would love for my students to get more involved in civics and knowing, what they get to do as a citizen. And so this focus is fantastic. I went to Granite Board of Education, Granite's board meeting last week, and heard a little bit about what Granite School District is doing with their Granite portrait. And they had some pictures of kids in elementary schools that talked about what they were excited to do after high school. And one kid, there's this beaming picture, and he said his parents were his hero, and he really wanted to be a doctor later. And this was the idea coming from Portrait of a Graduate, is that we're taking a plan at the beginning, and we're seeing it all the way through. And I'm excited to see what we do with it. I think we're still looking into it, and I'm thrilled, and thank you.
Next question. Our state tests math, science, English. We often hear that we spend too much time testing our students. Some parents opt out of testing on these basic academic subjects. With many parents opting out, they're opting their students out. Are the testing reliable? Are they necessary? Are they superfluous? And what testing, if any, would you recommend requiring, keeping, and eliminating? And we're starting with Audrey.
Wonderful. Again, I can go off of my experience as a special education teacher. When I'm determining if a student has a disability, I compare where they are compared to their general education peers. And that requires data and testing. And I really appreciate my math department at my school because, first of all, they invited this special education teacher to be part of their teams on Microsoft, so I know everything that's happening with the math department. And they asked, what should we do about our benchmarks this year? And I loved it because our district kind of gave them some leeway, and so my math department was deciding what should we do with this testing. And I was able to say, hey, a little plug for SPED over here. We have to have certain tests in order to compare our students to students without disabilities and see where they're at. I think data is really important, and it helps us get a picture. It's not the only data, but having those quarterly or semester benchmarks, having the state testing at the end of the year, that kind of stuff is really important for education and really important, at least for my piece, where we are qualifying kids and seeing what they need. So I think testing and getting good data, and just that, we don't need to over-test, is critical. And I think that's something definitely to address on the state school board level.
Thanks. Christina, your turn.
So if I have your question correct, are we over-testing our kids? Does the opt-out make it unreliable, and are they superfluous?
Yes,
That's your
and
three
which
questions?
one would you, so if you could, which one would you keep, require, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which one would you just keep and people could opt out, and which one would you eliminate, all told?
Okay, so that's awesome. So the overarching test in Utah is the RISE. There's many other tests, everything from Acadience to Dibbles to there's so many. I think there's 20 on the state opt-out form. So we have lots of tests. The fact that I cannot articulate them all in this moment is actually evidence that there might be too many tests that are asserted in Utah. I would argue that the opt-out rate has not yet reached the threshold set by the U.S. Department of Education. And as such, because our data is of the students that took the test, the average is this, I would call that data reliable within the scope that it is gathered. Once we start to worry about unreliable data, it's when we reach that 5% threshold and then the zeros start to kick in and that will affect our data. So that would be my assertion there. I do think there are too many assessments. I do work in a building where if added all together, if you bookend the time they spend assessing kids, you're at 4 full school weeks out of the year. And to me, that's a lot of lost instructional time that our teachers could be spent building relationships. They could be spent issuing instruction. They could be spent doing so many things when instead they are assessing. And if you think about 4 full school weeks, we start school in late August and we end in mid-June. Can you imagine what that would do to your school year? And so I would offer that assessments also would be something that are a huge stressor to our educators. And I would love to see our educators under less stress every day, all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was an accident, I promise.
So Christina, you talked about the testing score, and I have a question on that, so I'm happy to continue that conversation. Our proficiency rates, I will say, are abysmal, that's the word I will use. For the school year 2021, the overall rates combined were 44% in language art, 44% in science, and 41% in math, the same that you described. And yet, in 2021, the 4-year cohort of high school graduation rate was 88.1%. And it was stable from the prior year at same rate. Finally, the Utah ACT scores are now higher than our national average. It's 20.6%. 20.6. How do you explain the discrepancy between proficiency rates and graduation rates? Are we doing poorly? Are we doing, quote, sufficiently well? And what would you do as a state school board member to improve proficiency test scores? So I think we start with Christina, and then we'll go with Anna.
I have to pick on you, Franz. You have like 7 questions in every question.
I am so sorry.
It's all good.
There's just so much to cover, right?
It's all good. There is so much to cover. So I think the answer to your question is these are good questions. How is it that we have a 41% proficiency rate in one of our 3 primary subject areas, yet our graduation rate is 88%? How can those 2 be true at the same time? Could it be, and I'm asking a question, could it be that we are graduating kids without the skill set to function in the real world? Could it be? And that is something that we absolutely, as a state board, have to investigate. We have to investigate that, and that would be one of the things that I would take on as a state board member, is investigating how we have the dichotomy of data that come in conflict with one another. They both cannot simultaneously be true. And so we need to address that. I would offer that our ACT test score, while above the national average, is still at less than 2/3 of the top scores. If your top score is up there, you're still you're still down there, and I would love to see that rise at least 6 to 8 points on a state average level. When the best and brightest are taking that assessment, I would love to see that score rise, and I think the way to address that is by streamlining Utah education to an academic focus. And like I said, we cannot ignore soft skills, but we cannot neglect academics and elevate soft skills, because our kids graduate without the academic skill set to function in the real world, to shop, to determine whether or not they're getting a great deal at 20% off. These things are important things, and we need to address it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Audrey, your turn.
I really like this question, actually. I was thinking, okay, so my dad is a doctor, and he, he's near the end of his career at this point, and he assured that, he's shadowed many, incoming residents or whatever, and he said he's amazing that there are brilliant people who lack people skills, And I've been fascinated by this idea, and I think about my student population, and I think I want to ensure that I am giving them both the academics and their soft skills. And I attended a school community council for an elementary school in West Jordan a couple weeks ago, and this principal was out of her mind excited to show all of us at the end of this community council that their kindergartners had made so much growth in reading that they were now at the top of their district. And they had completed this by picking a program, going all in, all hands on deck, you know, parents, teachers, they were getting the kids excited, and they were making growth. And I loved that. I loved the hope that was there, and I loved that this school worked so hard and they met a goal. And I think working in the state school board and making sure that we are encouraging and working with our districts, working with our schools so that they can accomplish those good things is something I'd love to bring. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I have been told that we've reached our halfway point, and so we'll be able to take questions from our audience as well as people have already asked questions online as well. I'm a little unclear about how we're going to get the question from the audience, but I will start with a couple that we received through a YouTube link. Okay, first question is, are either candidate aligned or supported by Utah Parents United? I think you go first, Audrey.
Thank you. I am not aligned with Utah Parents United. I don't know if I need to say any more than that. But I don't know. Questions after.
That's fine. You don't have
Okay,
to use your 90 seconds.
Do I go a lot? I don't know.
So I am not endorsed by Utah Parents United, and I would go so far as to say I stand as an individual on my policy positions, and I would assert that part of the reason that I'm not supported by Utah Parents United is because I digress in policy positions with them in enough capacities that it would warrant that.
Let's take thank you so much, Christina. Let's take a question from our audience.
Does anyone have a question in the audience? Please stand. Speak loudly, the mic should pick it up.
Sure. Someone wrote, today's society tries to socialize us to a greater extent than any previous society. We are even told by experts how to eat, how to exercise, how to raise our kids, and so forth. How does this statement apply to public education in your experience?
So I cannot remember who goes first. I think, is it you just answered? Is it Christina? Okay, go.
However, if you want to, I'm easy to get along
Go
with.
ahead.
So I do think we make attempts to socialize kids in public schools. And it's, in my opinion, it is not the role of the school system to socialize kids and provide their morals and values. That's the role of the family. However, I would just like to offer that with rights and roles come responsibilities. And if you've worked in a school system for any period of time, it is very easy to see that some kids do not come with the appropriate skills they need to even eat a meal with utensils or use the bathroom and toilet paper. So as much as we need to draw clear boundaries between family and school, we also need to acknowledge that kids do come to the school with needs and need to be taught skills that they are not taught at home. But with that, I would offer that it is first and foremost the responsibility of the parent or the family to teach morals, values, and social skills. But if that is not done, it will rest on the hands of your educators. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Audrey, your turn.
Thank you. I saw you at the Granite Board of Education, so I appreciate public comment and your questions. So one of the classes I teach as a special education teacher is called Directed Studies, and it's a class where we work on homework and study skills and organizational skills and stuff like that. And sometimes I feel like I have a glimpse into all of the teachers and assignments in the school because my kids are asking for help. And I've worked with them on the coolest assignments. One English teacher was working on, a Scarlet Letter, I think. And she had the coolest videos that showed how we need to be careful about what are we taking in and what is really happening when, with different trends or things like that. And I was blown. I was like, I kind of want to be in English right now. This sounds like a really cool activity.
I've helped with history classes where they've had, they've had to look up a topic with different resources and different biases, right? This side, and this side. They're supposed to make inferences and stuff like that. And I think that our schools are really working to help students create their own freedom so that after high school they can think on their own. I want my students to leave feeling excited and liberated and that they can accomplish whatever it is that they need. And that kind of perspective and enthusiasm is something I hope I can bring to the state school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take another question from our audience.
I'm 14 years old, and recently in my high school, I figured out that there is explicit content in the library at my school, and I also found explicit content in my middle school as well last year. I've been concerned about this for a long time, and I hope that you guys will do something about it, so I'd like to hear your opinion on explicit content in libraries.
So we'll start with Audrey, and I will go to Christina.
First of all, love that you are here. So brave to come and ask a question to a whole audience like this. There is a library that says that books are windows. And I've talked with different English teachers. I just had a chat with my librarian like 2 days ago, and I attended a different school community council where they actually had their librarian come and speak to this very point. And we had a whole discussion. There were parents, there were teachers, the principal was there, the librarian was there, and they talked about pornography in schools and in books. And we talked about whether or not, this principal went to the librarian and said, is there porn in your library? Well, in our library. And this librarian said, there is not. But there is a myriad of options for our diverse students. And being in and representing Kearns, Taylorsville, and West Jordan, we have a really diverse population. And I appreciate that libraries are places where you can or cannot pick up a book. And I think that being able to represent different populations is critical to ensure that those students feel safe and comfortable coming to school. Thank you.
Christina.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for the question. And I'm sorry that that came to you in school, because it shouldn't have. And for our audience, I want to be clear that when this young lady says explicit, she's talking about the depiction of graphic sex acts, including necrophilia, including how-to guides for sodomy, including graphic rape scenes of young 10-year-old boys. So we're not talking about things that cause a little bit of offense to us. They're things that would and should not be available to students in a public school. You want to buy that at the market, that's your business. You want to get it in the public library, that's your business. But we have an obligation to protect students in our schools, and as such, my opinion doesn't matter because the legislature has spoken on this issue, and it is the job of our buildings to come into compliance with what the legislature has said. The legislature spoke in 53G-10-103 through the Sensitive Instruction and Materials bill that was passed in the last legislative session. I don't get a say in that. They have spoken, and it is the job of our local institutions to come into compliance with that bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Let's take another question from our audience, and then we'll go back online.
Okay.
Thank you. There are so many national political movements that fight to take up airtime in our local politics, especially in our schools. How will you keep the focus on local Utah politics and Utah schools in your position as a school board member?
Christina,
Awesome. So if I understand your question correctly, how do we keep it local?
Right.
We do. We put things in a filter, in a colander, right? And we put it through the litmus test. And if it is not right here, we keep it out. And if it's something we have to entertain, whether it be a current event or something like that, then we deal with that on a case-by-case basis. But if you're talking about the action of the board in its entirety on a month-to-month basis, we keep it local. You just do the job you were asked to do, period. I guess I don't know that maybe I need to ask clarifying questions, but to keep it local, you keep it local. You put your word forth and you honor your word.
Audrey?
I really appreciate that question. I am running for state school board because I took a day off and went to Educator Day on the Hill with the group called the Utah Teacher Fellows, and I saw how legislation is made, and this blew my mind as an adult, okay? And I realized that there are these hot topic issues that are all over society right now, on social media, in the news, and they're taking up so much time and energy. If a bill goes to the House, right, and we talk about this one for this long, we might not be able to address all of these ones. And that means that we might not be able to address things like, how can we improve academics, or how can we make sure that our students that are homeless are getting their needs met. One of my students last week said, my mom just got an eviction notice. I really want to come to school on Monday, but I don't know if I can because I have to help pack. My heart, my teacher heart. I want to make sure that if I'm on the state school board, that we are addressing the issues that will directly impact our students in their schools right now, so that we can take care of bigger issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's take an online question. They're being fed to me. So Audrey, we'll start with you. Why do the candidates, feel student health surveys are important to mitigate mental health and student safety in school setting?
Student health surveys, I think this would come back to resourcefulness and stewardship. Again, the special education teacher in me loves data, and I can only work with the knowledge and information that I'm given. So having surveys, and surveys may need to be worked on, we may need input on surveys, I am all for that. But I think that having some sort of eye into students themselves is huge. Creating a place where students can respond and they feel safe and comfortable to let me know how I'm doing. The instructional coach at my school was a biology teacher for 19 years, and she would constantly give little feedback surveys to her students, I don't know, quarterly or something, and would ask, how am I doing in this class, and how are you doing? And I love that, because the students were responding and giving her feedback, and then she could adjust her teaching. I think that's good teaching. So having some sort of system where we're able to get data from my kids and ask, what do you think? How are you feeling in school? I think that is very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Awesome. So I think maybe I misheard the question. Was the question, why do you think that the surveys are important?
It was. Yeah. Why do you feel student health surveys are important to mitigate mental health and student safety in school setting?
Okay, so I would offer that inherently the presupposition of the question infers that someone knows where Audrey or I stand before they ever ask the question. So I think that's a little nefarious, but I would go so far as to say that when we ask these questions, we need to do so, we need to consider first, rather, is this taking the place of academic instruction time? Are we elevating these surveys to something that your excellent educators know without a survey? Because your educators in this state are brilliant. They are really brilliant. They don't need a survey to tell you Johnny's struggling. They don't need a survey to tell you that Nevaeh might have gotten into a fight last night because she has a bruise on her chin. They don't need a survey to glean that information from their students. You're talking about brilliant educators, most of whom, 63% of your teachers in this state, have been doing this job for longer than 7 years. They know, and they don't need a survey to give them that information. I would also offer that when it comes to these surveys, are they appropriate or are they invasive to the family? Do they violate the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution? I would ask, are they quality? Are they integrity? Are they too long? Is a 45-minute mental health survey for a 6th grader too long? Because I would offer that it is too long. And I think that when we come to these questions about mental health surveys, I would also ask the question, Is that the reason we send our kids to school? Do we send our kids to school to take mental health surveys? Because I send my kids to school to learn reading, writing, math, geography, civics. I don't send them to school to be queried on their mental health status. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
May I?
Rebuttal?
I don't know how to. So there's a student on my caseload who has a lot of trauma in her background. She's from African descent and told me once that she's trying to figure out how to be like a student right now with her parents who are really pushing tribal culture, which, I mean, that's your right. I know that sometimes she's not going to tell me directly because she barely talks in my class. And so having an opportunity to share otherwise could be beneficial.
May I rebut?
Sure.
So my understanding is all the information on these surveys is de-identified, so taking them wouldn't help Audrey in that situation at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's take another question from our audience.
Yes. I'm increasingly concerned about the huge amount of data that is being collected on my kids, and I'm wondering what you think the role of the state board is in protecting my child as they go forward into the rest of their academic career, into the workplace, to protect their data at such a tender and crucial age that they're at.
Christina, we start with you.
Awesome. So, ma'am, I would tell you that FERPA will not do that for you. And so, ergo, the state board probably cannot do that for you until such time that we address FERPA at a national level and thus address UFERPA at a state level. Because there's a lot of data sharing and, for example, the SHARP survey, schools get paid money to administer that survey. And the fact that they get paid money to administer that survey should tell you that your child's data is worth cold hard cash to somebody. And your school is selling their data to that company by accepting that cash. So I would argue, A, are we elevating the income of that cash above our academics? And is that the appropriate role of schools? Is it why we send our kids to school? And I would argue that the board needs to come under and secure the spirit and intent of the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. It's imperative, and it needs to be done in this state because it hasn't been done. We need to come under and adhere to Utah code, and we must honor and respect the proper roles of family and school and not blur those boundaries. And much of the data that's being collected from our kids is being collected in a way that's in contravention to Utah code. And I think the state school board needs to put an end to that.
Thank you. Audrey.
Thank you again for your question. So whenever I start an IEP meeting, first I have to give out procedural safeguards, which outlines your rights as a child, as a parent of a child with a disability. And those rights include confidentiality. I think schools are very practiced in making sure that schools, that student info is not given out. I don't, as a special education teacher, I have to be so careful with the information that I gather and collect, and I have to make sure that I am meeting the needs of the parent and the child to ensure that their information is protected. It is not my right to disclose anything about you, your child, their child's disability, et cetera. We all have a role in ensuring that our students feel safe, that our parents feel comfortable having their child at school. And if I'm elected to the state school board, I would very seriously consider making sure that your student feels safe and that you feel comfortable and safe having your student in our Utah schools.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
So I would just offer that I'm not certain that's what the question asker was asking about, because the data in an IEP meeting is very different from the data that's collected through
talking about the Chromebooks and things like that.
Yeah, the internet use, the data that comes when your child uses an electronic device, and then student use of those electronic devices, and everything from their web history to how long they were on a web page is then gifted to the company that gifted that electronic device. And that to me is very concerning.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
So we have a few more minutes. I think we have potentially the time for 2 more questions,
Okay.
and then closing statements. I'll take a question from online and then another question from the audience. What is the biggest obstacle facing minority students? And I think we will start with Christina.
Oh, I'm talking a lot. Sorry, sister. I think, in my opinion, the biggest struggle facing minority students is high expectations. I think we expect far too little of our minority students, and I think that we should view any and every student that walks through that building door with an asset-based mindset, and we should really look at how we can springboard every single asset they have into exceptional learning, exceptional success, exceptional scores on assessments, and we tap into their assets and we springboard that into helping them reach for the stars and not for excuses. And when we discuss this, there's one person that's out in the ether in Utah that talks about the bigotry of low expectations. And I think that in Utah schools, one of the biggest things facing our minority students is the bigotry of low expectations. And I would like to see us get rid of that and produce an asset-based mindset that helps us springboard every single Utah student into the stratosphere. Thank you.
Thank you, and I did make a mistake. You would have been Audrey's turn, but I think we'll.
It's
go
okay,
ahead.
we get along, we'll shake on it.
My apologies.
Whoever gave that question, I appreciate that, especially in this district. Kearns just became the second minority majority in our state. I have a student who, she struggled with getting to class, okay? She was a little sassy with her teachers. She would fight back. She didn't really want to go to class. She meant well. Fantastic student. I loved her from the beginning. But some teachers would be like, ooh, she's kind of a lot. And her Latinos in Action teacher recommended, this is her senior year, that she join Gear Up, which is a program, like an outside program that comes to the schools and helps a lot with college type stuff. And I have never seen the student so excited. She came, I was after school talking to another teacher, and she came in and was like, guys, look at my poster. I made this. I'm like, you are here after school? What is happening? It is these leadership opportunities. It's the fact that a teacher recommended to her that she go and join this outside program, and she is doing so much, and I love this. It's creating these leadership opportunities for our minority students. I have seen so many great things happen in the schools, and I would love to see the state school board continue to support resources outside groups that can help provide that for our students.
May I?
Well, I think we're running out of time, but if you want.
I'll promise to keep it short. I love this story, by the way. I think it's a fantastic story. What I would offer is that it's not just minority students who have those problems. We have many, many students. I work in 3 Title I buildings, and many of those students would be considered what we call the majority, and they have the same struggles that this student faced. And I would offer that as a state school board, we need to have these programs in place for every single child with that issue. And when we start to put boxes around kids, we start to divide instead of unify. And there's many students that need those services.
I really want to go a little longer than a couple. I want to take a couple extra minutes, take one question from the audience. Go ahead.
So I remember last year taking a MAPS test on my iPad at my school, and I remember getting multiple questions that did not have to do a single thing with what the test was about. And I would go to my head and I would say, how do I answer this question without bringing forth my political ideas or what my parents believe? And how are we going to bring tests back to reading, writing, math, science, and stuff like that, instead of political ideas in schools?
So Audrey is going first. If we could keep it short so that you have enough time for your closing statements.
Another brave soul. I love, love, love that we have some teenagers here. The high school teacher in me is loving this. Okay, guys, I also am not sure what the MAPS test is. Is that an elementary test?
Math. I think you said
Math? Anyway, that doesn't matter. But I think questions like that, I would love to see that when we're giving assessments, so I'm thinking about the ACT when they're asking questions about Like, what careers do you want after? And that kind of information is helpful when we're planning for what comes after high school. And so bringing it back to reading, writing, and math, I just don't think you can do school with only reading, writing, and math. As a teacher, in order for me to even get you to learn math, I have to make sure that you feel safe, comfortable, that you're happy to be at school, that you have the skills to be successful later. So I need some of that extra information in order for me to meet your needs as a student. Thanks.
Christina.
So MAPS testing is from the NWEA, and they're an organization that's primarily funded by Bill Gates. He's one of their primary investors. It is not the primary assessment here in the state of Utah. The primary assessment here in the state of Utah is the RISE assessment, which is sanctioned by the Utah State Board of Education. There are many districts that do administer the MAPS testing. Granite is one of them. It's in many of their schools. And I would wonder why we're doing both. And so that would be my first question and my first assertion. And then my second assertion is any query of your political affiliation, your personal values, your sexual orientation, that's in violation of Utah code. And as such, in the public school system, if an assessment or a survey queries those things, it is in violation of Utah code, and you and your parents should have reported that. And then hopefully we could act on that as a state board, or the subsidiary agency that deals with those complaints could go ahead and remedy that through the appropriate channels. But those kind of questions should not be asked in your state assessments. It's in violation of our systems here.
Thank you for our audience, whether online or here, present, to have asked all these questions. I think it's time for closing statements. We have 90 seconds for both of you. We start with Audrey.
Okay, you guys have been a fantastic audience for this nervous first-time debate teacher. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for coming. Thank you for taking time out of your day and for caring enough about a state school board race to be here tonight. And thank you to the Utah Debate Coalition for putting this on. Thank you for being here as our moderator. I invited a couple of students to this debate tonight because I wanted to make sure that my students knew what I was doing and they knew that I cared. So I love seeing you guys here. I think that getting our students ready for what comes after includes being engaged. It includes knowing how to read, write, do math. I love math as the math teacher, but there's more. Our schools, some of the families here, you guys are fantastic. You're doing a great job meeting the whole need of your child, and we need you, and I would love you to come be volunteers in my school. But also, we need to ensure that we're taking care of all of our students, and that includes my students who are homeless, my students who do not speak English yet, all of my students have a disability, my students who are different and need something more. And on the state school board, I want to ensure that we are hitting all of the things that our kids need to be successful. I'm Audrey Dameron. You can check me out on voteaudrin.com, and I hope I can be on the state school board to represent you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina, your turn.
Awesome. I love that Audrin addresses the students with needs. You know, McKinney versus Vinto and McKinney. The McKinney-Vinto Act is what I'm trying to say, addresses our homeless students. There are processes in place for every student with a special need. Are they perfect? No. Do we need to work on ensuring that those acts and that those things better serve our students so that we can serve them better locally? Absolutely. But I think that we need to remember that the family is first and foremost the first line of defense and the first teacher of that child, and we need to honor and respect those boundaries. And I've seen some things in the state school board over the past few years that cause me some concern. And one is that I feel like we are in grave need of members that care more about defending truth and preserving liberty than they do about appeasing activists. And by that I mean we really need a school board that is there for kids. They're there for kids. And then ultimately, I would love to say we need a school board that is going to move to reduce redundancy, complexity, and dysfunction in our system to reduce the workload of our educators. I don't know if you caught the teacher voice right there. To reduce the workload of our educators. There is too much on their plate. And the state school board is long since derelict in their duty to reduce the workload of the educators in this state, yet we wonder why they're leaving in droves. And so I would offer that with that, my name is Christina Boggas, and I would respectfully ask for your vote for the Utah State Board of Education in District 8. Thank you.
Thank you, and this concludes District 8